Hey guys, in this video we're going to patch the trunk floor in this Budget Nova. Now I'm going to do this on its own video because it's a pretty good standalone video whether or not it's tied to the Budget Build or not. Instead of burying it in the middle of fixing the quarter panel rust and the tail panel stuff, I'm going to do the trunk pan all by itself. So let's get to work. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go in here. I've got my patch panel laying in here. I need to know where it's going to stop, and even though it would be great if it would cover up some of the stuff I've got, like these little holes over here that I think were for battery cables, it doesn't go up far enough to cover that, and a little bit of the rust up there in that corner, but it's going to be 80% better than it was, at least. So what I'm going to do is I got to mark the edges. Now the trunk is too rusty and my Sharpie is too dull to mark the edges that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this rust reformer that I normally use to cure rust after I convert the rust over after I scrape it with a wire brush, and I'm going to use this to mark my edges so that I can tell where the trunk pan stops and I'll know where I can cut. I know where my edges are. Okay, so I've got that marked now. I can clearly see where my patch is going to meet up all the way around. Now there is a little tiny bit of structure underneath the existing floor pan. You've got your gas tank support, gas tank strap supports that go across here. Now there's also part of the rear cross rail or something that starts somewhere around here and it runs across the very back of this pan. So I'm going to go underneath, I'm going to mark where that stops, and I'm going to mark where the gas tank strap supports are so that I can cut out 3 sections, basically a section here, a section in the middle between them, and a section on the other side, and then I can go in and get the metal off the top of the supports so that my new pan will set down on top of them. And the supports do go past where the patch is going to stop. The supports come all the way up here, so hopefully they'll still be very secure once I pull this up, and it'll be I'll be able to weld them back to the patch when I put it down. Now this line right here is the rear support I was talking about, and I've got my gas tank strap struts right here, or gas tank supports right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a mark right here, and kind of that'll guide me on the inside where I can see where I'm at. Okay, one on top, and then one, I guess right there, because the strap is actually wide right here. Not sure how I'm going to do this. This is a bad idea. Okay, so at first I made some cuts, but that was too big of a pain. So I drilled some holes on each side of my gas tank supports right here, on the wide part of it right here, and then I've got my cuts that I did make that show where my support across the back is tied in. So I'm going to cut out some stuff in between and try to get most of this pan out in just a few minutes. Okay, and after about 25 minutes worth of grinding or cutting with a Ziz wheel, this is what you get. Now I've got to go ahead and clean a bunch of stuff up, got to clean my edges up, and I got to come in here and get this stuff off the top of the gas tank supports. So I'm going to work on that, and I stopped a pretty good ways down here because my inner structure is right there. It comes up and goes up this way, so I could have brought this up farther, but my patch pan only goes up to right here, so that's why I stopped there. I'm going to finish getting the rest of this cut out, and then we'll get the patch pan set down in there and see how it fits. When it's real rusty, it doesn't take much to get the spot welds loose. Okay, so I was able to peel this whole side off without using a grinder. Now I still have some spot welds I need to grind down, and I'll have to clean this up really well. And then I'm going to clean this edge up right here. And since my pan goes up here, I'll probably go ahead and weld it up here. I'll clean some of this up where the real bad rust is right there at the support, but I'm not going to cut all of it out because I got that other structure below it. And this one, I'm going to cut it off right there, right above where it's at. Even though some of that's rusted and does need to be changed, like I said, I want a little bit of an overlap. Now I'm going to start on this side, get this peeled out, and hopefully, I started on this right at 8 o'clock. It's 9:12 now, so this is an hour and 15 minutes worth of work. All right, I was able to get most of that peeled off without too much of a struggle. I went ahead and cleaned my edges up just a little bit, not a bunch, but a little bit. Now I'm going to go in here. I'm going to vacuum all the dust and stuff out. I'm going to hit the inside of the supports with a wire brush really, really well, and then I'm going to spray them with some rust converter. Then I'm going to go along and I'll grind off wherever my holes are going to be for my spot welds. I'll grind it back clean once I put the rust converter on there. I don't like using weld through primer. It gets a pain in the butt, and I'm not sure that it works great. And then I'll clean all the edges up real quick, clean the edges up on my trunk patch, and then I need to mark my holes on my trunk patch and drill those, and then I can get it clamped in here and start welding. Okay, I got all my edges cleaned up, and they're cleaner than they look on the camera. I'm looking at the camera right now, and they're not as rusty as they look on the camera. So the supports were actually in really, really good shape. As rusty as the trunk floor was, you know, they weren't bad at all. They've got some surface rust in them still, but I'm going to put the rust converter on that, and that won't be a big deal. And then I'm going to lay my piece in here, get the edges. I've already cleaned my trunk pan, my patch up a little bit. I'm going to lay it in here and clean my edges up on it and get everything kind of screwed in place and ready to weld and mark my holes for the supports. Okay, I got my patch screwed down. Now I'm going to get in here, get underneath, mark where my supports are so that I can drill my holes and for my spot welds in the supports. All right, I scratched me some lines in the bottom right beside the supports on both sides. So I ought to be able to see those lines and use that to mark my holes for my welds. I hope. All right, I can kind of see my lines here, so I'm going to start cutting them in. Let's see, that's the back side. Okay, so I took and cleaned up the areas where I drilled all my holes. I hit them with a Scotch-Brite pad and my little grinding disc real quick. Cleaned all that up really good, and then I hit it with some rust converter and a little bit of paint. Hopefully it'll be dry because I'm gonna start welding. I'm gonna get that set in there. As soon as I've still got to paint the insides of these. I'm gonna do that real quick. I'm gonna give it a few minutes to dry, and hopefully I'll be done before midnight. Okay, I got all that sprayed and treated on the inside. Now I'm going to get my panel laid down in here, get everything screwed back down in place, and see if I can start getting some welds down. Alright, so now I'm going to try to drill a couple of screws. I've got all my holes ground down. I'm going to try to drill a couple of screws into the gas tank support so that I can pull it up closer to the trunk floor. There we go. Okay. Well, I ran out of welding wire, so I've got a little bit of welding left to do. I got an empty spool of welding wire, so that's great. But it's 11 o'clock at night. I'm probably pissing off my neighbors already. So I've got it tacked in around the edges most of the way around. I've got some areas that aren't, I mean, not most of the way around, but most of the sides are tacked. Let's put that away. And what I'll come in here and do is I'll come in here kind of like I did the floor pans. I'll come in and I'll use a combination of hammering the patch panel down and screws to pull it up tight, and I'll weld it every 2 inches or so all the way around. I got almost all of my support welded on this side, and then I got a few places on this side welded before I ran out of wire. Okay, so it's the next morning. Got a little late last night, so I'm gonna finish this up now. I've got to put a few screws in to tighten some of these gaps up, beat the panel over a little bit to where it's closer, and then I'm gonna weld everything up and clean it up, see how it looks. Now, you can see what I did here, other than boogered up some welding, was that I put my screws in and tightened everything up, and then I beat the edges down to where they're real close. And all of this used to be like this. So what I'll do now is I'll go back and finish weld this instead of just having it tacked in place. Okay, so I got from here to here solid welded. Some of it's ground down, some of it's ugly. But once I finish dressing it with the grinder and making it look halfway pretty, it'll be okay. Now what I do have to deal with is these two big divots right here. And basically how you deal with something like that, where the new pan is not the same as the old pan, you make it work. Okay, that took about 3 or 4 minutes worth of beating, and I wouldn't call it pretty, but I would call it better than it was. So it looks a lot closer. I need to clean my edges up a little bit and get ready to weld it. Other than that, it's good to go. Okay, so I got the floor pan welded in, the trunk floor welded in, and now what I got to do is I've got to take my wire brush. I'm gonna clean all this up and put some rust converter. I won't go to the entire trunk because I still got to do some work up there, but I'm gonna go ahead and put some on here before I go to lunch. I'm gonna go around the edge, probably about 4 or 5 inches away from the trunk pan, and then include the trunk pan since I have so much bare metal on it. Okay, so I got it wire brushed real good, got all the edges cleaned up. Now we're going to put some spray on this and try to make it look like it wasn't hacked in. Okay, wow, that looks a whole lot better than it did before, and it's nice and solid. So I'll have to clean the whole trunk up once I finish my shock towers up there and the deck filler. I'll get all of this cleaned really, really good, and then I'll put some paint and stuff like that on there, get some more rust proofer on, and it'll look like a different car. Still got to fix this, the deck filler. And from underneath, this really doesn't look like, other than the trunks, the gas tank supports, it really doesn't look like it was changed out, because I had this thing sitting outside so long that it's nice and rusty to match the rest of the car. All right, that's how you hack in a trunk floor patch. Now, obviously it needed an entire trunk floor, just like it did a whole floor. But we're going to put in patch panels and try to overlap stuff and get it where it's completely usable, completely safe, and good enough for me. And it's way better than it was. That's the key of this thing. Better than it was. We're going to get in this thing and drive it, have some fun. It's going to be cheap, it's going to be fast, and it might be good, but I doubt it. We're going to have fun in it. It doesn't matter. So anyway, guys, I got plenty of other stuff coming up. I'm going to put the deck filler in later today. That video will be out tomorrow, the next day at the latest. Then we're going to start working on driveline. I picked up a used rear end. I picked up a used engine. I've got a transmission to build. I'm going to try to do the transmission disassembly live on video. I'm going to do a live stream, and I'll be taking that apart as I'm answering questions. So I'll announce that a day before or early the morning of, whenever we decide to do that. So anyway, you guys have a good day, and see you next video.